right. Thank you. Good evening. It's now 7 o'clock, and I'll call the Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Karen.
Here.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Here.
Alderman at Large Lori Wilshire is here. Alderman Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Gidge.
Here.
And we also have Alderman Harriet Gathright, and we have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start off with public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak before the committee? Please stand, come to the mic if you're... No, no one. Well, thank you. Okay, then we'll start with interviews. Mayor, do you have your Danielle Skelly with you? And David Heath? Thank you, Mayor. Unfortunately, we did not get copies of their resumes with our packet, so
You did
you'll
not?
have to give us a little.
I did not know that. Now, I have, here, I have a copy on both of, is there someone who could make copies? I don't know. You want to do that, or do you want me to just kind of summarize it?
Yeah, you can
could
summarize
pass
it,
it
Mayor.
around.
Let's not make.
All right, so
All right,
first,
thank you.
for the Downtown Improvement Committee, I've nominated Danielle Skelly, who's right on my left. She is one of the two owners of the new boutique on Main Street, Camaraderie. She and Cammie Harris own the store. Previously, I believe it was in Milford, so they moved to downtown Nashua. Danielle has been very involved in merchandising and marketing for a variety of companies before getting into her own retail business. She has lived in Nashua since 2005. She has 3 children that she's raising here in the city. She's loves Nashua, and she's very interested in helping to contribute in terms of advising us as to how to improve the downtown.
Thank you. Danielle, would you like to speak?
Sure.
Thank you.
I was honored that the mayor brought this to my attention. As he says, I've lived in Nashua since 2005. I'm a resident, and now just opened my business here. It will be a year in July of 2017. But I wanted to open the business and get through that first year. And my next goal on that bucket list was to get more involved in my town. I just see a lot of potential in downtown, and I'd like to contribute to that and get involved and make suggestions.
Good. Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Alderman Lopez.
Just a comment, being the downtown, well, the Ward 4 alderman, sorry, rest of Ward 4, and living downtown, I see camaraderie, I see how they've built a following very quickly, become a destination. I think they've done a really good job over there in adding to that neighborhood feel on that particular stretch of block. So I'm looking forward to seeing their input on the Downtown Improvement Committee. I think we have a committee right now which has a wealth of expertise and a lot of long-term experience from some of the more established businesses. But I also see a lot of new businesses popping up, and it wasn't too long ago we saw them popping up and then falling down. So I'd like to see input from newer businesses on the Downtown Improvement Committee that can act as a link to the newer businesses who may not be as well connected or networked as the more established ones. And then also to be able to bring issues that are facing the newer businesses coming in to the Downtown Improvement Committee. So I'm looking forward to this appointment.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you, Danielle. Nice to meet you tonight. And thank you for your willingness to step forward. It's always nice to have a fresh set of eyes. Like Alderman Lopez said, you know, we have a lot of longtime downtowners who are interested, but it's nice to have someone new and fresh, and thank you for that. And congrats on your 1-year anniversary of your business. You bet.
Anyone? Alderwoman Kelly.
I would like to echo a lot of what Lori and Tom just said. You guys have been an incredible addition to downtown, and being there myself, I've seen your impact. I'm also dressed by them this evening, so
Unplanned.
Is that brownie point?
No comment. But I am looking forward to, you guys bringing that energy to the Downtown Improvement Committee.
Awesome.
Thank you. I too would like to voice my sentiment that I think this is a great idea, and you really hold your head up high, because the last time I was in your store, you were having a major leak down the walls, and that's right.
Holding
So
an
we
umbrella
quickly left
inside,
so you
yes.
could handle the pails and shovels. So I think it's always nice to have new and fresh faces on any committee. Gets a good perspective on new ideas. So
Great.
thank you for your
Happy
contribution.
To do this.
Thank
I'd
you.
love to.
Okay, Mayor, next.
Next, Madam Chair, for the Airport Authority, I am nominating David Heath. David's been in the city a long time, involved in many, many community activities, including the Chamber, the Boys and Girls Club, where he was on the board, the Plus Company board. He formerly was an accountant. He changed careers, but he was an accountant with Melanson Heath and Company, and was an accountant for some decades. Then moved into the area of photography. He bought the the studio Mark Emile, studio down the street. But he has a lot of experience at the airport. He's a pilot. He was on the rules committee when they were debating the rules over there, and so he's been very involved at the airport for quite some time. And we have 2 openings now as a result of a couple of resignations. Or Mike resigned, and then pardon? And Sandy did not seek reappointment. So so we have 2 openings, and David will be a great addition to the airport, in my opinion.
Thank you. Mr. Heath, would you like to speak?
Sure. The mayor asked me, back a while ago, why do you want to be on this committee? And I've been asking myself that for the last while. But it's something that I've been a pilot for 25 years. My office was right across the street. I purposely picked the airport to locate my former office at, and it's actually in the same building as my flight school was, which is kind of neat. But I've been in Nashua since 1976, and this is and I'm now in my second business in the city. The accounting firm was the first, of course, and my second business is in downtown, and I'll be glad to talk to you about some of the things I wouldn't mind seeing. One of them is mufflers on motorcycles, but other than that, but the airport has always been I've always seen that as one of the underutilized gems in this city. I think the FAA has invested a ton of money in that new runway and the infrastructure over there, and it's just waiting to be marketed. Now, that general aviation has had some challenges over the last 10 years or so, but I think we're in a great position to compete very well in the general aviation marketplace for more business, and therefore more fees, and therefore more taxes for the city. And it's just it's a great gem that I look forward to helping nudge along a little bit.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Alderman Wilson.
I don't have a question, but a guy who's a pilot, an accountant, a photographer, a man of many talents. Thank you for stepping forward. I think you'll be an awesome fit on the Airport Authority. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lori.
You bet.
One thing that the members, I think Mike Rosenblum, before he resigned or afterwards, I forget, mentioned was that it would be nice to have someone on the board with some financial expertise, and certainly in addition to his other attributes, David, having been an accountant for so many years, can clearly deal with the numbers and the budgets and the various financial issues that the airport faces from time to time.
I just hope I didn't forget it all when I walked out the door, past that big magnet that sucks all the knowledge out of me.
Alderman Lopez.
I was just curious. I remember your association with Boys and Girls Club. I think you're on the board for a while.
I'm still on the board of 20, over 25
Forever.
years, yeah.
So my question is, with the opportunities that the airport represents, is there a partnership between the Boys and Girls Club and the airports? I know they have the annual like free plane ride kind of a deal, but what about teaching kids about flying or making it seem like a real thing to them?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great, I mean, we just had the Young Eagles event, which we have once a year, at least once a year over there. And that's, you know, crosses all demographics in the city. It's not just, but particularly, I agree with you, Alderman Lopez, that I think there's an opportunity for some of the kids at the Boys and Girls Club to expand. You know, it's one of those things where the kids that are at the club, you know, they're in kind of their own, just like a lot of people, they're just in their own world. It's their world, and it's a great world in a lot of ways. But the idea of actually getting in an airplane and flying it is probably not even on their radar, so
yeah.
to speak. So I had to, yeah, you were ahead of me on that one.
There's no way around it.
But it's a kind of thing where certainly if there's an opportunity for, I've actually taken kids from the Boys and Girls Club on we did a fly sail trip a few times where I also have a captain's license for sailing boats, and a friend of mine had a boat up in Maine, and I threw some bunch of kids in the airplane, flew them up to Maine, and took them out sailing for a week. And
How
so
do I sign up for that?
say what?
We all want to sign up.
Yeah, right. So you know, so there's definitely, you know, anytime you can you know, introduce any kind of youth, any youth in the city to new opportunities or ones they normally wouldn't see, I'm all for it. I kind of, you know, there's ideas that we've had for some of the land over there, and you know, there's all kinds of opportunities that we can do with whether it's the Boys Club, the Y, or just the city in general. That property, that airport out there is a gem, waiting to be used.
Alderman Lopez.
So I know we have Wheels and Wings, and for the members of the public, because this comes up a lot, it's not Wheels and Chicken Wings, it's Wheels and, it was
Right.
moved to the airport. For some reason, it gets confused with Brewfest sometimes, but do we have other air shows?
There
real air
there
shows?
was a Confederate, what they call the Confederate Air Force that would come through once a year. I'm not sure, Farrell, if that's coming this year or not, but it's a nonprofit group out of Texas that their sole purpose in life is to keep the B-17s and all the old tin flying from World War II and even earlier. And they've been visiting us somewhat regularly, sometime in the summertime. I don't know if they're scheduled for this year, but yeah, the events that are going on there, you know, the good news is we have a great manager now that's over there who's very active and always looking for ways to showcase the airport to the community, because a lot of people don't even know there is an airport. Number one, or if they see planes flying overhead, oh, they must be going to Manchester. And especially if there's noise, it must be coming from Nashua. But even though they're going it's really going into Manchester. But so certainly anytime we can, you know, we can promote it. But so there's that air show. Of course, the Daniel Webster College used to have their Collins Foundation down in, I think they're down in Sudbury, or no, Stowe, somewhere down that way. They have a huge fleet of Warbird kind of airplanes, and so there's a fair amount of interest in Nashua. We just got to make sure we capture them.
Yeah, I would just love to see that kind of the evident enthusiasm that you have go to the airport authority along those lines, because they do a lot of great work maintaining and operating it.
Right.
But sometimes you have to go a little more than operating it. You kind of have to celebrate it.
Yes, and you know, we also, my other thought was to also have work closely with economic development in promoting the airport as a jewel in the city, that so to attract businesses that perhaps, you know, have either want to have their own aircraft, or the charter facilities that are over there that they can avail themselves of. So the airport is also a great selling tool from an economic development perspective as well.
I agree.
Anyone else? I agree, Mr. Heath. I think you'll be a great addition for this because of your knowledge of the airport. And I have to agree with Alderman Lopez that I think the
You don't have
airport.
to.
Okay,
Not many people do.
I know. Once in a while, we agree. I have to agree that I think the airport is underutilized. I was really happy when our truck program, children's, moved to the airport so that people
Touch a
could get a
Truck.
see of that. Yeah, Touch a Truck moved over there. I thought that was a great idea. So you're right, working with economic development could make some vital changes that would benefit the city as a whole. Not that I like flying, but I think it's a great idea if you get young people from the Boys and Girls Club or Girls Inc. or any of those organizations to get them involved. Those are areas that need to be looked at, and there's always jobs there for them. So I think you'll be a great addition. As usual, Mayor, you brought some good people in. Thank you. All right, so we will bring up your nominations later on in the meeting, and then you'll be told when to come in to get sworn in. So we thank you both for showing up. Thank you, Mayor, for coming. See you Wednesday. So as you know, several months ago, this committee and then the full board approved the grades and step levels for our unaffiliated employees. But one of the recommendations, because there were some concerns and questions asked, we asked the human, God, my brain just,
Human resources.
yeah, human resources, my brain went blank. Human Resource Director, Larry Boudreau, to meet with these staff people who had concerns and division directors and also the Personnel Advisory Board to have some discussion, and I asked him if he would come back and give us a report to the committee. So, Mr. Boudreau, I see you're here, and would you bring up anyone else that? It's up to you. Thank you. And Sheila, you're the chairperson of the Personnel Advisory Board. Thank you. So I'm going to turn over this part of the meeting to you, Mr. Boudreau.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Karen.
You're welcome.
I'm Larry Budrow, the Human Resources Director. And Alderman Karen has portrayed that, or I'll fill in, that a couple of days before the bill was due for final passage on March 14th, there was a flurry of communication from the Public Health Department. And they were concerned about the fact that some of the job grades in that division were reduced, and they had the impression that the new plan was going to pay less than the old plan. And the first thing I'll say, and I hope that at some point some of those people see this and understand that by making this public remark, I feel serious about it. I feel badly about that. Feeling undervalued hurts people's feelings. And that certainly was not the intent of this plan. We put a lot of work into this plan, and the intent was to do something that benefited all of the unaffiliated or non-union represented employees and did well by the city. This is a group of compassionate individuals. They fulfill vital city needs. They do it professionally and unselfishly. And to the extent that I may bear some responsibility in that perhaps I could have communicated more thoroughly in advance, hindsight's good. I apologize to that group. Subsequent to that meeting, and so when Alderman Karen introduced the legislation that night, she asked for final passage with the stipulation that we look into this issue, and so that's what I've done, and that's what I'm here to report on tonight. I reviewed the issues with the chair of the Personnel Advisory Board, Sheila Cabot, to my left. And we're confident, as I sit here tonight, that the process of establishing the grades was thorough and that it yielded sound results. I then prepared individual earning statements that forecast the earnings of the new plan compared to the old plan for the next 7 years for the 28 members, now 27 members of that group. I met with the division director, and I met twice with the deputy health officer. He was the young man that approached the microphone that evening and corresponded. I think very, very importantly to this whole issue was that the salary grid for the merit plan had been untouched since 2008. The grades in 2008 were the same grades that we changed. The new grid adjusts annually. But to really be cognizant of that, you kind of had to burrow in and read the language. And I'm convinced after talking to Ren and Bobby Bagley that as people were kind of flooded with emotion about this issue, they weren't immediately cognizant of that fact. So then, and this is vitally important because, for example, the salary grid that was just presented that became effective on January 1st, 2018 will be obsolete 4 weeks from now. So already the grid is 1% higher, technically 0.9% higher than the grid before. I've met with the deputy health director. He knows I'm here tonight. I speak with his acknowledgement that the message I send today is a fair one. I've pledged to review the market information that can become available for us to continue to review these grades. But there's no urgency, and that's important. People are benefiting from this plan. They're not being harmed. 25 of the 27 employees will begin receiving 5% raises instead of 3% this July 1st. So the old plan would have provided 3. It had 17 steps. The new plan provides a 4% difference between steps plus the index from year to year. So that would be 4.9 this year, probably 5 next year. 25 of those employees won't hit the top of the new grade for 2 to 8 years, anywhere between there, 2 to 8 years. So for some of the folks that were most concerned, it really, I think, was largely that emotion about feeling undervalued because some of the grades changed. Because in fact, some of them will get 5% raises for 7 years from now before they hit the top of that new grade. So from a material standpoint, people are not injured there. 25 of the 27 employees will earn $14,000 to $50,000 more over the next 7 years with the new plan than they would have through the old. The new plan is forecast to cost the division $685,000 more during the next 7 years than the old plan. Ms. Cabot and I are not new. We're not new to this business of compensation. We've been schooled in it and have worked it for years. And our approach to setting the grades was sound. Compensation systems almost always rank positions internally within the organization first. And that's exactly what we did. We, of course, started out with the merit system. The grades have been assigned a relative value now for years and years. We reviewed those. I reviewed them in September of 2016 with individual director by director as they looked internally within their organizations and said, yeah, that makes sense. And then we brought all the directors together in late September of 2016, and everyone had at it in almost a semi-public forum. And so the reason that this system works is because then you go out and you benchmark jobs, and you benchmark common jobs. So as an example, many organizations have custodians, and many organizations have accountants. There are only 2 organizations in the state of New Hampshire who have public health nurses. 3 actually, 2 municipalities and the state of New Hampshire. So you fill in the blanks with the common jobs, and then you go back to that internal ranking system to plug in your own organization. I dwell upon this for a moment because there were criticisms that we had not surveyed adequately in the public health department. But we started out the whole process with a group of 120 employees and purposefully only surveyed 20 positions. And we knew full well right at the outset that we only really needed to do that many because this concept of benchmarking works. We surveyed 3 in public health, and I've been able to get data for public health nurses subsequent to that, so we're now at 4. I've committed to Mr. Bowden and Ms. Bagley that as they can get data or help me find sources of data, we'll take a look at that. So over the course of, I think, years, not months, and the plan allows for that. The plan allows the Human Resources Director and the Division Director to make changes in the grade. Our obligation is to meet a lot of people's needs here, and that is to be able to attract people to come to work for us, to retain them here, to motivate them, and you do that by paying fairly and paying within the market rates. Our obligation is to another 87,000 people, and that is to make sure that we do so affordably and don't spend unreasonably. So that's the balancing act, and those are the conversations that I've had with the public health folks, and that's my report.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from any? Alderman Lopez.
I just want to comment that I consider our health department to be a regional leader. I think they've more than proven their worth in terms of their knowledge and their capabilities. They've dealt with some pretty significant issues for the city over the past years, and in their line of work, they generally don't get recognized for it. So we're passing through an opioid crisis, which nationwide is causing crushing effects on municipalities. And here, public health was leading the charge on one of the very few strategies nationally that has worked effectively. They have combated all kinds of issues with STD outbreaks, with public health issues, prevented a number of disease issues. And I know this from going to the public health meetings every year, or every month, every year, while I was liaison. Issues like simple things that are like just kind of disgusting, like bed bugs to ticks, Lyme disease. So my characterization of the health department is that they're extremely qualified and they know what they're doing. Bobby and Ren particularly deal regularly with things that are extremely distasteful and emotionally impactful. You don't look at overdose statistics, and you don't have people relapsing and passing away on committees that you're working very closely with, and then come to work the next day and continue to work on a policy that will impact it without having some degree of professionalism. So I just don't want the responses that we might have heard previously to be characterized as an overabundance of emotion. I have found that they're very good at understanding systems and reading long-term impacts. So while they may not have the specific background that you have in human resources, I think them raising their concerns is something that was worth listening to, and I'm glad that you're doing that. And I appreciated the acknowledgement that you began with in recognizing that there were some missteps that were taken at the beginning in presenting what otherwise should be considered an effective plan, but maybe there wasn't specific surveying done to the satisfaction of other people involved, more directly involved, and maybe there was disagreement as to what the impacts would be. I just think it's important to remember that this is for non-union employees, and particularly non-union employees that we don't want to lose. So I think the city should be sensitive to that position, because we've seen turnover and we've seen changes in the public health department over the last couple of years, and it was specifically one of the departments that I was concerned with when we had the original discussions that led to this step plan, that what do we do when our highly qualified public health department isn't compensated adequately enough to keep them here? And what do we do when our our need for public health nursing professionals and health professionals can go down the street and make more. So I hope that's what our effort is, and I hope that is the result that we accomplish with this. Because while I do want to make sure that citywide we're making the best decisions we can to decrease the compression issue that we were originally discussing, I also want to make sure that we don't lose very qualified and very experienced city staff.
Would you like to comment?
I take those to heart. I led, albeit much smaller, but with many of the same issues in a smaller world, the public health department in Derry for a number of years. And so I do have more insight into that world, and it is a difficult world. So I take your comments to heart. I'll also tell you that during the conversation with the division director, I pointed out that another change in the plan is that it no longer restricts the ability to, you're no longer restricted to only going one step a year. That the division director, with discussion with the mayor, now has the freedom in the plan to increase steps. And so to the extent that there were funds to be made available, that there's another tool in this kit. And so I meant not to malign those people by any choice at all. Overabundance of emotion might have been a bad phrase. But I take to heart what you said. I want to reassure you that there is room within these grades should the city decide to compensate differently. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And again, my intent is to make sure we don't lose people who are doing a very good job at a time when we really need them to continue doing that job.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I would like to thank you, Mr. Boudreau and Sheila, for stepping up to the plate. I know that there was a lot of concerns and questions, and believe me, I understand this process because I was part of it for 40 years. And when you start off with something that you don't understand, and then you see it again in 10 years, you're not always sure that you're getting what you need. And maybe that was the part that was missing, that it wasn't relayed to the employees, the changes in the cost factor. And as Alderman Lopez says, we don't want to lose valuable employees, no matter what department it's in. But health department, that group over there that I worked with for about 10 years when I was at that building. So I know they're very dedicated, and they have always been dedicated. So I think that if we've satisfied them, and I think we've satisfied the committee, that you came back and took the time to speak to them specifically about this, I think bodes well with your department and your advisory board. Now, I understand you and I talked because there were some other issues that had come up concerning the unaffiliated. Were you able to speak? Do you have anything to speak concerning that?
I do.
Okay. So you might want to give a little bit of history on that. I certainly can, but
Certainly.
thank you.
The now unaffiliated policy incorporates language that was in the merit plan that has to do with the sick leave balances that are payable upon retirement. And so if you were employed here, and the language now reads that if you were employed here before July 1st, 1995, you might accrue 720 hours of sick leave and be paid that in full upon retirement. And that language was in the plan, I believe, from when the plan was first conceived until 2001. And in 2001, there was a change, retroactively effective to July 1st, 1995, that employees could now accrue an unlimited amount of sick time, so no more ceiling of 720 hours, and receive 20% of the balance upon retirement. This committee, and I believe the Board of Aldermen, was made available of that concern. The change happened 17 years ago. I've spoken to the mayor, who understands the issue and the implications of it, and I can't speak as to his reasons, but he has indicated to me that he doesn't intend to propose legislation to amend that plan at this time.
Can you tell us how many employees this actually affects at this point?
It affects 12 current employees and has in fact has affected or impacted, I think, 5 to 6. And the reason I say I think is because you have to delve into the old computer system, really be sure, but I would say no more than 6.
So when this, oh, did you want to speak?
No, did we, are they here for this?
Yeah, they are. But before we get into that, before we invite 2 members of the police commission up, may I ask, do you know if this was a legislative change or was this just a memo to the Board of Aldermen concerning that particular change?
That's a tricky question.
Oh,
And it really probably is best reviewed by someone with more skill than I. It did occur. It did occur during the budget review process in 2001,
okay.
and but you know, there's many arguments that I've heard that any time that the Board of Aldermen subsequently voted or amended that plan, they were doing so. So I would think that if someone wanted to investigate how that became, they should ask someone other than me.
Okay, thank you. So we have, and we'd like you to stay, we have 2 members of the police commissioners here concerning this particular debate because it affects a few of their employees. So if you would like to both come up and speak on this, and then I'll let the committee ask questions if they would like. Thank you. Please take a seat wherever you would like, wherever you feel comfortable. So would you please introduce yourselves?
Yes, my name is Jim Toller. I'm one of the police commissioners. I'm the chairman of the police commission.
Thank you.
Matthew Plant, on the police commission.
Okay. So you both have been listening to the conversation from our HR director and the comment that the mayor has given concerning this particular concern that had been raised during this 3-4 month time period. So I know you had some questions and comments that you wanted to give to this committee.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. The first thing I want to say is I want to thank the HR director. I've met with Mr. Boudreau a few times to discuss this item as well as Corporation Counsel. So just for the record, he's been very willing, open to have a discussion about this and dialogue back and forth. So I want to thank him for his support. So I think the topic that we're here to talk about tonight is, as the chairwoman said, yes, there are roughly about 12 people that are affected by this commissioner plan, as well as Commissioner Dahl and I. This was brought to our attention, I would say, sometime during the last year. And as we investigated this, according to the records that the police department has, at that time, believe it or not, the chairman of the police department was Mo Arell. And Mo Arell had sent some letters to the mayor's office at that time to try and rectify and change this situation for a particular person at the police department. I won't mention any names because the names are irrelevant. And actually didn't get a response back. And then another letter was sent and didn't get a response back. Now, to be fair, I think this was probably directed to the office of the mayor, so I'll just leave it at that. So since then, really, nothing's been done about it since that time, according to the different people that you talk to at the police department. So I think, as most people would look at this particular situation, these individuals that were affected by this change, it was more or less a retroactive decision that was taken out of their hands. I mean, they had no say in it. And so from the police commissioner, and I think I can speak for all the commissioners, all three of us, you know, we would like to do our best to see that this situation is rectified and changed for this one individual. Quite frankly, when we started having these conversations, we really, one time we thought this person may be the only person. And because we're only dealing with the police department at that time. So after different conversations with city staff, it's come to our attention that there's approximately 12. So I understand the mayor's concerns about maybe the financial impact. I think that number would take place if all of those individuals retired at the same time. I don't think that's gonna, or the same day. I don't think that's gonna happen. I guess at the end of the day, I think where the police commissioners are coming from is, I think it's, whether it's the city or any business or any public entity, is pretty much we need to do the right thing. You know, as I've said to a few people, I understand the financial concerns, but whether it's $10 or it's $10,000, right is right. You know, wrong is wrong. I'm not sure wrong is the right terminology, but we'd like to do our best. Some of the employees have been very patient going through this process. Commissioners have committed, you know, to this individual that we will continue to pursue this, and we think that's the way to go. We want to make sure that we work through the city, because again, I mean, one of the things we learned when we were on the Board of Aldermen years ago is, I mean, the city is responsible for, you know, personnel issues and things like that, even though the police department, you know, for the most part, reports up to the police commissioners. I think as a whole, all the three commissioners want to work with the city, you know, to make sure that we can come up with a appropriate resolution that is satisfactory to everybody. I don't know whether Commissioner Plant wants to add anything.
No, just that we, you started out to say we speak with one voice, and it's very clear that this is the right thing to do for the employees. And that's all we're asking for.
Thank you. Question? Alderman Wiltshire.
So if I understand this right, back, what was the year this change happened? 2001?
2001.
There
I was actually on the Board of Aldermen at that time. I remember something happening,
Jim
but.
Tolner.
Yep.
Alderman Tollner.
Yep.
Wow. How'd you vote? But that's what I would like
Yeah.
some clarification on. You said it came up through the budget process. Well, the budget is a resolution, so it would have had to have been passed by resolution, right? If that's when it changed. So what happened, it was the unaffiliated employees could accumulate up to 720 hours, and that was it. And then this change in 2001 made a retroactive decision that you could carry unlimited, but only get paid 20% of those days when you left. That's
Correct.
the issue.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And that affected 12 people. And the dollar amount we're thinking is somewhere in the $150,000 range-ish, more. Don't say more.
It's a little more, a
You
little
can
more,
say
right?
more if it's more.
Well, it depends on a lot of variables because, as Mr. Tollner mentioned, this would happen over time.
Right.
And people get raises, and no one knows how much sick pay they'll still have. Given those two and you don't know when they'll retire.
Right.
So given those three variables, for the 12 employees, I would forecast between 150 and 190,000.
Okay, so I guess my next question is, of those, so you're saying, I guess, that wouldn't be paid out right now if we put in a resolution and said, we want these 12 employees compensated, that would be making those 12 people whole, essentially, I guess is what the outcome you'd be looking for.
Yeah, excuse me. So what it would do is, if legislation was put in, it would just give back to those 12 people the arrangement from a sick day perspective and what they could take when they happen to be employees, when they signed on.
And I agree, I think doing the right thing is right. What I don't understand is how this happened. I mean, what caused this to go retroactive. I mean, I could see when you change a plan or a policy moving forward, but to go retroactively makes no sense to me at all. So I'm really curious if anyone's talked to legal about how this actually happened.
Did you have an answer? Oh.
The legal department has amassed a small sheaf of correspondence, and I'm sure if that's not been made available to the committee, it could be. And they really have to rely upon that kind of trail of memorandums and meeting minutes, but they have done some work, and that's why I was really trying to defer the question of how it happened then to the legal department, if I could be allowed.
That's fine. Alderman Lopez, did you have
I
your
want to make
hand
sure I'm
up?
not confusing the math here. So the old plan was if you accrue 720 hours, if you have 720 hours when you retire of sick time that you haven't taken, then you get the sick time. And then the amendment was, if I understand it, you could unlimitedly accrue, and then take 20% of whatever you accrued. For the new old plan to be worse than the old one, doesn't that mean someone would have to have like 14,000 hours of sick time? That doesn't sound like it's possible to do.
100 and-
May I? Alderman
Yes.
Karen?
Yes,
I
you may.
If my I think it's more like 3,500, right? So 10% of 3,500 would be 350, and 20% would be 700. So I think it's a little north of 3,500.
Okay, that's a little bit
hours.
better. I was like, so I did the math literally by multiplying 720 by 20, which is probably where I went wrong.
Oh,
But yeah, I just couldn't conceive of somebody actually accumulating that much hours. 3,500 seems possible if you're doing it over a long career and healthy.
Unhealthy. All right.
Well, our police usually are.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll speak. So when this took place, I wasn't on the committee, but I was part of the talking points. And actually, they were going to put it back, way back, almost to my time. And several of us said, that's not fair, because when we were hired, there was no such thing as a merit plan. There was no merit salary scale. There was nothing. But two things you were guaranteed was your vacation and your sick leave if you accumulated it, okay? 90 days, 720 hours, whatever, and whatever you got for vacation that you were allowed. And somewhere along the line, this changed because we kept telling everyone that, not just myself, but other people, that this new formula should start either the first of the year or July, which is our fiscal year. Anyone hired after this July of 2001 would come under this new plan, just like they do in private industry or whatever. When you make changes, people are grandfathered so that they're covered. They're not losing what they were anticipating getting if they stayed long enough to retire from their position. But it didn't happen. Now, there are quite a few, because I do know some other people that retired that lost that. So you really have to work hard, and people do get sick as they get older. They lose their vacation and sick time because they're using it, because they need to, not just because it's frivolous, but because they need to take that time. So I agree with both Alderman Wilshire and Commissioner Tollner that it's really unfair for a group to be stuck in a basket that they're not getting their due. How we do that, I don't know. You know, that's why I asked if there was legislation that had been put in place. And I know that people had complained about it after the fact, but just kind of sat there. And then when the changes came in, that's when we were getting, well, I was getting a lot of phone calls concerning this particular problem. So I don't know what we can do. I think we need to work together on this, because granted, you know, the police department is an entity on its own, but they still come under the rules and regulations for its employees and what they do. I feel bad. I really do. So I don't know. We have to think about that. Maybe it's not something that we can do today or tomorrow, but I think it needs to be something that has to be discussed with legal and maybe conversation with the mayor. Because I think that in a retrospect, $150,000 to $190,000 may seem like a lot of money if you were handing it out tomorrow, but you're looking at some of these employees who still got 10, 15 years to go before they retire. So I'd like to know what the committee would like to do in conversation, and I'll start with Alderman Wiltshire.
Well, you know, now that the issue's been raised, and these 12 people are sitting there looking and watching and waiting to see what's gonna happen, what happens tomorrow? I mean, say we go home tonight, we put some legislation together, tell legal this is what we want to do, and then somebody decides the next day they're going to retire, you know, where do they fit? And I imagine some of these folks are probably near or eligible to retire.
Could be.
I think we need to do what's right. That's my opinion. And I think the people that were affected by that should have been grandfathered, and the policy should have been effective going forward, not backwards. Doesn't seem fair to me.
Okay, Alderwoman Kelly.
And that was actually going to be my question from an HR perspective. Is that grandfathering in more the way that people tend to go, or is it this retroactive when you have any change, really?
Mr. Boudreau, do you think you can answer that question?
I know it's kind of big.
Because I can't.
I'm going to plead the fifth.
Yes.
I work for the mayor.
I don't.
It is customary when changes are grandfathered to grandfather it on a date, often in the immediate future, so that it does not affect anyone who's sitting there that day.
That's, okay, that's
Thank
what
you.
I was going to say.
Yeah, that's what my question was. That's what I've experienced myself. But
Okay. Do you have anything to add, Sheila?
No, I just said that's what I've experienced.
Okay.
You always make the changes, you grandfather those that are impacted, and you go forward from that point, and you communicate that to the employee.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. All right, then, yes, Mr. Chairman Collner. I
So,
was going to call him Alderman.
again, I've worked very well with Mr. Boudreau on this, and we've met with legal. So maybe to Lori's point earlier, like what if someone's ready to, retire tomorrow, which we're not aware of anybody on our end. So maybe what we do is we just check with legal to have them do a little digging to see how this transpired. And then after that, then we can take some action. I was on the Board of Aldermen at that time. I do not remember
you.
a piece of legislation coming to the Board of Aldermen to change it this way, because there would have been a boatload of dialogue, okay? I do think that we were informed, and someone mentioned it tonight, during the budget process and right before the budget process, when we were discussing particular line items in the budget. This is the effect of that line item in the budget. I do recall, I think at that time it was Carol Anderson and Maureen Lemieux that were doing it. And, we're just a police commissioner now. I mean, but I'm not, so they're going to let the city do their work. But if they do have any questions of us, but I will say those people that are in this basket, they've been in this basket for a long time, so hopefully we can work together and move through this relatively quickly. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Alderman Wiltshire.
I was on the board at the time as well, and I don't remember this. I don't remember this coming before us.
Right.
So it wasn't a standalone piece of
Right.
legislation.
Yeah.
Right.
Alderman Lopez.
I'd just like to observe, for those of us who weren't on the board, that Alderman Kelly and I both raised concerns at the last budgetary meeting that we appear to be speeding through every yellow light with this year's budget because of our larger concern about the tax reevaluation. And while it's good to have our priorities on the individual expenses of individuals, if we're not really vetting the plans that are being presented to us, then this happens further down the line after a lot more problems have built up. So, I mean, this is just an example of what could go wrong if somebody slides something in that they thought was a great idea. Everyone around, kind of nodded along because it sounded like it was a good idea, and then it was not. And I think also that's another reason why we should always be mindful of the input from employees who would be affected by it, because a lot of times they'll spot something being on the ground and seeing it firsthand that we might have completely missed.
Thank you. Alderman Wilshire.
One other thing, it's comes to mind that it would never have passed muster if it were part of a collective bargaining agreement.
Okay. Alderman Kelly.
So would the people that are here come back to talk about this once we've done a little digging? Is that what we were hoping to come out of this?
We can certainly do that. Mr. Boudreau, if you and I probably could meet, we could maybe talk to legal and Chairman Tolner and see what we can come up with and maybe come back, in the fall or something with what has transpired and recommendations I mean, it's been this long, so a few more months, one way or the other, I don't think is going to change anything. If the committee doesn't have, unless the committee has some other ideas. Okay, I'll start with Alderman Wilshire.
I'm just concerned about someone who might be ready to retire and is holding off, just waiting to see if anything happens. I think the sooner we can move on this, the better. And I'm willing to, work with you and legal and try to
Okay.
figure out what we can do to make this, to expedite this a
Okay.
little more.
All right, if that's the will of the people.
It's mine, I don't know
This
about the rest of the people.
This people. Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Boudreau and Shelley, for coming tonight and giving an update and the concerns that were raised by some of the employees and the talks and communications you had. And I think I understand the salary and steps a lot better than I did. Yes.
Madam Chair, I do have
that's
a
right.
question for Mr. Boudreau.
Certainly.
And that's back to the health department. I'm sorry to go back, but I was sitting here thinking, hearing this, and then thinking about what I understood happened with the health department. Their top grid for their pay levels or whatever scales, pay scales, were they changed? Were they lowered?
A couple of them, yes.
Okay, so those are people that we hired and we gave them a range of pay, correct?
Yes.
All right. So I just heard a discussion about grandfathering. Typically, that's what's done with the people. You don't usually take them down. They usually grandfather where they are because they were hired like that. So did you think about that at all when you were working with the health department? Because they have knowledge, education, experience, and we're #1 in the state certified.
May I respond?
Yes, you may.
That's the function of the fact that the grid now climbs, so that with the exception of one person, so the grid, every grid stops somewhere, and that is the premise of the entire pay plan, is that you get to a top step, and there is an amount of pay in July 2018 that the city's not willing to pay, but not willing to pay anymore. So that's one premise about the plan. But the fact that the grade indexes is that although a couple of the top grades were lower on January 1st, 2018, they're going to keep getting higher, and they're out ahead of the employees. So by the time they get to the top's going to be higher than it was now.
Top.
Yes, it's a very fair question given this conversation, but it's not an apples to apples question.
Okay. Thank you.
Am I good? Are you clear?
I heard you.
Okay. I'm happy to meet with any alderman at any time and go through, as I did, if I may for a moment longer?
Yes, you may.
So not only did I produce 27 pretty elaborate This is what would have happened under the merit plan. This is what will happen under the new plan. This is what you can anticipate for the next 7 years, given that there's an assumption about the rate of inflation. But I used 1%, which I thought was conservative. I also wrote an exhaustive memo on March 30th that I sent to all of the unaffiliated employees that summarized the highlights of the new plan. And I closed with a comment that said, anyone who has any individual questions, call me. And about a half a dozen people did. And with a little bit of lead time, I produced a specific estimate for them. And we sat huddled by my computer through the office and we went kind of step by step. And so I am willing to do that with any of those employees. And certainly I'm willing to spend as much time with any alderman so that they would be comfortable with what we've done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Again, thank you for coming and presenting, and hopefully we'll see you again with Alderman Wilshire to talk about what we can do for those that I call sitting in a basket.
Thank you very much.
And
Good night.
thank you, Chairman Tolner and Mr. Plant for coming. Thank you. All right. Okay. Okay. Okay, back to order of business, communication,
We have none?
applications to license hawkers, peddlers, vendors license,
None?
appointments by the mayor.
Downtown Improvement Committee, Danielle Skelly, new appointment, 175 Main Street, Nashua, for a term to expire June 1st, 2021.
Okay, you heard the motion. Is there any conversation? If none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Opposed? Okay. Next, Nashua Airport.
Nashua Airport Authority, David Heath, new appointment, 7 Casey Circle, Nashua, 03063, for a term to expire August 31st, 2020.
Okay, you heard the motion. Any comments, questions? Alderman Wilshire.
Two great appointees, but I gotta say, Mr. Heath is one heck of an individual. Very talented, very committed to this community, and I really want to thank the mayor for bringing him forward. Two great individuals. I just happen to know David a little better. You know, he's been around a long time, and he is something else. He's great.
You want,
There's
I,
something to be said for newcomers as well.
Absolutely.
absolutely,
Absolutely.
yep. Fresh ideas.
Yep.
I concur. I think Mr. Heath is going to take some of those ideas, comments that you made, Alderman Lopez, to bring the airport to the forefront, and because it is a gem, and people don't know about it, really. So, okay, so with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, appointments have been done. Unfinished business.
We have none?
Okay, new business resolution.
We have Resolution 18038, authorizing fireworks at Holman Stadium after 10 p.m. on July 17th, 2018.
Okay, you heard the motion. Any conversation? Alderman Lopez.
Something going on July 17th.
Yes, I'll speak on that. Holman Stadium is celebrating its 80th anniversary.
Oh, we have
Yay.
fireworks.
And it will be taking place that night, which is also the All-Star game for the Silver Knights. So because there'll be a half an hour, well, I'm trying for 10 minutes of programming before the ball game, that the fireworks, if the game does not get done by 10 o'clock, normally the fireworks can't go off. So as a one-time, we would allow them to shoot the fireworks off after the ball game. It was either that or stop the ball game at 9 or 9 to shoot the fireworks off, and that's a little crazy. So it's a one-time only for that date, July 17th. So, any questions?
Are you sure they weren't doing it just because it's my birthday?
That's your birthday? Oh,
Yes, I
wonderful,
thought, wow, look at
21.
that.
21.
Kidding. I'll be the same age as Holman Stadium.
Right, not quite. Okay, so you heard the motion. Any more comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, so motion has passed. New business ordinances.
Have none.
Okay, discussion. Alderman Wilshire.
I really appreciate the fact that Mr. Boudreau and Sheila Cabot and Commissioners Plant and Tolner came in to talk to us tonight. And I'm glad they kind of, worked through some of the issues that the concerned people at the Public Health Department were having. And I hope that's the case, that they feel that someone's listening and that they've maybe resolved some of this, or at least made them feel more valued as employees of the city, because I certainly value them. I think the work they do over there is sometimes thankless. And they're not on the radar all that often either. They're the unsung heroes in the community. They're dealing with all these diseases and all these other things that most people in the community aren't even aware of, so I'm glad the discussion was had and that they came in, and I look forward to trying to resolve the issue of the 12 in the basket.
Okay, anyone else? Alderman Lopez.
I just would want to add that with the amount of work that the Public Health Department has been doing, their budget hasn't been getting any bigger to do it with, and their building hasn't been getting any newer. So they really, really, really have been working hard, and they don't get as much visible credit because they only get that when it's Flint, Michigan, and the public health has some kind of disaster or nightmare to take care of. So I think they are very important, and they prevented a lot of things we would never know about because they just made sure that everybody was following the health code they were supposed to. They made sure the public was educated, and they did a lot of emergency planning and contingency planning for things that we, might ourselves have ability to react to, but some of our more vulnerable populations don't, like severely cold weather, severely hot weather. They just do so much work. I think the last thing we should do is alienate them or frustrate them. And when we're talking about doing the right thing should be listening to our employees and not censoring them when they may be bringing concerns that matter deeply to them that we at least owe it to them to listen to.
Anyone else? Alderman Kelly.
Just as a follow-on, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that Mr. Boudreau was pretty clear that he's welcome to anyone to come and talk to him, and I think he does a really good job of explaining at least where his stance was and how he's done the research. So I hope that if there's anyone else out there that still has concerns, that they'll take him up on that. I know I'm going to. So.
Anyone else? Well, I have to say that after that meeting in March, when all of these employees came forward, and it's not just the public health, there were a few others from other departments. The first thing that Mr. Boudreau said was he took blame for some maybe not getting that more detailed information out to everyone. So he really stepped up to the plate, I think. I sat down with him for a couple of hours, and when we went over these steps and grades and what have you. So he's willing to take the time to talk to the employees, no matter who it is. And this other issue about the group not being grandfathered for their sick leave it has come up before, but never quite this way, only since the steps and the grades have come through. So I think that we can work through that. And with Alderman Wilshire, who's, has more expertise than I do, and we can talk to legal and see what we can come up with. I'm sure that we can help them somehow, some way, to make it fair, because nobody should be left out. Normally when you're hired, especially when you're getting benefits, maybe not so much salary, but when you're getting benefits, you want to make sure that you don't lose them, because they're making changes, which companies do, not just municipalities, but companies do the same. So I appreciate your conversation, and please take Mr. Boudreau's offer up to speak to him about anything concerning our city employees. And I know how hard the health department works. They're in a building that should have been condemned when I was there in the 70s. It's a sad situation that our health department people, nurses, welfare, all of those people are in that building. But that's for another day. So, public comment, we have no one here. Remarks by the alderman, anything else? Alderman Lopez.
Tree Streets Block Party is this Saturday. It starts at 1, and the last band is playing 5 to 6:30, Best Not Broken. So I encourage anybody to come down who might be watching. We're blocking off Ash Street between Central Street and West Hollis. So any neighbors living on that street, you won't be able to get your car in and out, and you can't have it parked on the road. But we did arrange for nearby parking. So I'll be doing more canvassing this week. I already went out and did it. But if anybody has any questions about that, then definitely reach out to me.
Thank you. Alderman Gothard, yes?
Madam Chair, just want to thank you for the invite.
You're welcome.
And even with the learning curve, I really find it really fulfilling to come to the different committees and hear what's going on, the conversation and everything.
Good,
So,
thank you.
thank
And
you.
please take Mr. Boudreau's offer up and spend some time with him. Good. No non-public session. So can I have a motion? Alderman Wilshire.
Okay, move to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned at 8:10 PM. Thanks, everyone.